So, you've taken the Sakinorva test, and your results are a little confusing, hard to interpret. Or, you have no idea what Sakinorva is, but you're interested in MBTI and would like to learn more about your function usage. We'll cover both. What is the Sakinorva test? Well, it's probably the best functions test we have. That doesn't mean it's a particularly good functions test, but it's useful. Based on your answers, the test will rank your function usage, then suggest you your MBTI type from 3 different systems. However, this ranking can make results a bit confusing because function usage between different individuals all of the same type can vary wildly. What they are, what they think they are, what they're over-representing or peacocking or fighting. That's what we're trying to figure out today. Before we get into it, I am not an expert. These are trends I have noticed reading and interpreting others' MBTI results. This is the best I can offer you. But don't take it as gospel. Alright, we will use this ENFP's result to explain the trends I'm talking about. Firstly, your inferior function will probably rank lowest. You might wonder, well, if this is a test charting my function usage, why would my shadow functions be higher than my inferior function? Well, the test doesn't exactly map your function usage as much as it does your representation of functions. So your shadow functions will probably be stronger or rank higher than your inferior function because you are contending with your shadow functions while repressing your inferior function. That's almost universal. Your lowest function is probably your inferior function because you aren't using it and you aren't fighting it. Now, point 2. If your dominant function is a judging function, not a perceiving function, your dominant function will probably score highest, but this is far less universal than your inferior function scoring lowest. And notice I said if your dominant function is a judging function, particularly an extroverted judging function, but any judging function, because no matter what you think of yourself, or no matter what you're contending with, you will fall back on your dominant judging function, if your dominant function is a judging function, particularly if it's an extroverted judging function. This might seem obvious, but it gets trickier. Determining your dominant function gets trickier when your dominant function is a perceiving function. That's harder to pin down. If your dominant function is a perceiving function, your critic function, your second shadow function, will almost always be overrepresented, even higher than your auxiliary. You'll notice ENTPs and ESTPs, I know it's a stereotype, but often it's true, like arguing. This has nothing to do with a stereotype and everything to do with their critic function, their judging critic function. Their critic function is TE. That means ENTPs and ESTPs are hypercritical of the way others are doing things, especially by force. Hence the argumentativeness. If you look at INTJs and ISTJs, their critic function is introverted thinking. Despite against stereotypes, INTJs and ISTJs seem really to like arguing, for the same reasons as ESTPs and ENTPs like arguing. INTJs and ISTJs like arguing because they are critical of people's internal thinking systems. And in both or all 4 instances, that overrepresentation comes not from their use of that function, but their conflict with that function. On the FP and FJ end, again, dominant perceiving functions. You'll notice ENFPs and ESFPs always posture and peacock about being the nicest, most well-meaning people, which you might associate with FE. When you really look at them, they aren't. Or if they are, they're selective about it and they aren't controlled by it. There, the FP's critic function is FE. They are contending and conflicting with the idea of who they are versus the good, well-meaning person they want to be, or they're critical of people who come off as fake, FE users, for not being nice the way they should be. Look at INFJs and ISFJs. Other very critical types. Critic function, FI. You'll notice INFJs and ISFJs usually get stuck on the idea of being unique. What is morally right and morally wrong, when the way they really process things is by looking at what other people are doing and then analyzing that logically. They will overrepresent FI where they don't have it. FPs will overrepresent FE where they don't have it. Your critic function, second shadow function, will usually overrepresent when your dominant function is a perceiving function. Point 3, or another common confusion with types. You are super extroverted, so why are you typing as an introvert? Or you're super introverted, why am I typing as an extrovert? Particularly an extrovert of your two types. So ENTP typing as an INTP, INFP typing as an ENFP. Why does that happen? Well, again, Sakinorva doesn't type which functions you use, but I want to say the functions with the most activity, or the most focus, or the most conflict. So, if you're gripping, or you're developing your inferior function, if your inferior function is controlling you, or you are stepping into and getting a better handle on it, especially if you're deep either into the tailspin or into the upswing, your inferior function will come across as stronger. I'm an INTP. Recently, I've been typing as an ENTP because I've been working on my FE. It's more conscious, I want to develop it, I want control over it, I want a nice, happy relationship with my FE, so I'm overrepresenting it now. I'm sure that will go away once I stop giving FE as much focus, or once my function uses level out. But for now, again, focusing on the inferior makes you type as the type who has a little bit better control over that function. INTP, inferior FI, I'm typing as an ENTP because ENTPs, same functions, pretty much the same order, except with a better focus on FE. The test does not consider what you're going through or what you're doing right now. Point 4. Probably don't want to hear this one, but in my humble, limited experience, FI users cloud or mask or misrepresent their functions on these tests. If you're an FI user, or you're suspecting you're an FI user, and your function results are all over the place, ask yourself whether you are answering the questions based on who you are or based on who you see yourself as. That still might not clear things up, but usually the more screwy and skewed function results are, the higher chance that person's being an FI user is, particularly INFPs and INTJs. INFPs usually overrepresent FE and TI. The confusion, I think, comes from the way FI and TI seem to operate similarly. So you'll notice INFPs or INFPs who are mistyped will often say they spend a lot of time thinking about things. On the surface, that sounds like TI or FI. You need to dissect what that thinking is and how it's operating to figure out whether that is FI or TI. Because just spending a lot of time thinking doesn't clarify what's happening. As for overrepresenting FE, remember, FE for INFPs is your nemesis function. This is not what you do, but rather what you want to see changed in the world. Usually INFPs want to see FE group harmony changes while being socially disharmonious and not always super nice themselves. Trying to be. What they aspire to be, what they are, not so much. And FI, just the way the function works, self-perception, clouds that. Same with INTJs, but it's a different deal. Usually INTJs will overrepresent their thinking functions, and all their other functions will be all over the place. The reason ISTJs don't have that problem is because SI is it has an odor. It's a pungent function. If you have SI high in your stack, it will show. If you have NI high in your stack, that's another, like I said, perceiving function. It's cloudy. If you mix FI into that, it's even cloudier. In my experience, INFPs and INTJs are the most common confused mistypes on Sakinorva. ENFPs being a close second, because God, do most ENFPs like overrepresenting their FE. And finally, which of the three results on the bottom should you look at to determine your type or get an idea of where you need to look? In my experience, grant function type is usually pretty accurate, unless you're developing your functions. Again, almost always on the grant function type, always test as an INTP. Recently, testing as an ENTP after I started working on FE more. So your grant function type will probably be either your type or something close to it. Myers function type, I have no idea. That one's in its own world. I don't know what the hell that is or what it's there for, why anyone would use it. I ignore that one. Myers-Briggs type. That one, it's accurate. Probably more accurate than the grant function type, because your grant function type, there's no interpretation. I understand the Myers-Briggs type thing is closer to the ocean way of ranking MBTI types, which is why I normally stick with grant. But if your grant seems off, your Myers-Briggs type will probably be a bit closer, and there will probably be a bit of variation in it, a little bit of variation. You can focus on, dissect, and figure out from there if you're still having trouble. So, I hope this cleared some things up. I know Sakinorva isn't the most reliable, but it is the best we have. It's a valuable tool. All we need to do is figure out where the mistakes are and how we can correct them or better interpret them. Hope it helped. But that about rippity wraps this one up. I hope you enjoyed watching, because I certainly enjoyed making it. quick, easy, digestible one this time. Boys, like if you enjoyed, because that helps me out a lot. Subscribe if you haven't, because we do this shit sometimes, and comment your thoughts, because I love hearing from you. What do you think? What are your experiences with the Sakinorva test? What's your favorite functions or MBTI test? Always interested in gathering new materials for my little files. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Really, we have a lot of fun on this channel. So much fun. In fact, you could put it online and test it. Just a lot of good, testable fun. And that's how much fun we have on this channel. And I look forward to doing this with you guys again in the future.